Hey guys, Pastor P here. Hope you're doing well today. Happy Friday, our third day of Lent. And on this third day, we're entering into the Gospel of Mark, chapter 3, as we do our Lenten journey through the Gospels of Mark and Luke. And so I love this particular chapter because it's one of the chapters that we use during our healing series. And I encourage you whenever that comes back around to catch that. In Mark chapter 3, I just want to read this part for you. It said, another time Jesus went into the synagogue. He's in the church. He's inside the temple, okay? And a man with a shriveled hand was there. So there's other teachers, there's other religious folks around. Some of them were looking for a reason to accuse Jesus, and they watched him closely to see if he would heal on the Sabbath. Act like he didn't know what the Sabbath was. And Jesus said to the man with the shriveled hand, go ahead, stand up in front of everyone. And then he asked them, he asked the people that were there, the religious people, those folks who had come to check things out, which is lawful on the Sabbath, to do good or to do evil, to save life or to kill? And they remained silent. It goes on to say, he looked around them in anger and deeply distressed at their stubborn hearts. And he said to the man, stretch out your hand. And he stretched it out, and his hand was completely restored. And the Pharisees went out and began to plot with the Herodians how they might kill Jesus. Why they want to kill him? Why? Because he was out there doing the Lord's work, so to speak. He was out there. It didn't matter the day or the time or the hour. It didn't matter the moment. It didn't matter who was there. It didn't matter who was standing in judgment. He was there to heal. And I love this because a lot of times people will begin to judge what they do not understand. And you see those folks in that church, how many times they've probably been asked to heal on that day, or someone might have come in who was sick, or who, like this gentleman, his hand was shriveled. And it wasn't about Jesus making a spectacle of him, but Jesus was there to show them that God's will is to heal, and God's will works 24/7, 365. It is not limited by religion. Okay, it's not limited by address or location. Okay, and so I just thought that part was just so cool. And here in Mark 3, this is a message to us. What God has for you is for you. It doesn't matter who's around or what's going on or what time of day or what the location is. It is God's will to heal. And what God has for you is for you. You can't stop it. And so we go on in this particular chapter, and the crowds began to follow him even more. I mean, they're just bringing everybody to him. Why? Because they're experiencing the things that God's meeting them, Christ is meeting them at the point of their greatest need. And there's a drawing to that. And so in that, there were a lot of people who are coming. He's going to need some help. And so we find that he appoints the 12 in this particular chapter. And then I think it's kind of interesting. He appoints the 12. He surrounds himself with those who he has spoke to and asked them to follow me. He didn't beg. He didn't offer any wheeling or dealing. He just said, follow me. And so surely they were witnesses to the things that he had been doing, and that encouraged them to leave what they were doing and to follow him. And it's kind of interesting here that it says that in verse 20, Jesus entered a house, and again a crowd gathered, and he and his disciples were not even able to eat. And when his family heard about this, they went in to take charge of him, for they said, he's out of his mind. See, his own family. Who is this? Who is this? And what does he think he's doing? Okay? And the teachers of the law who came down from Jerusalem said, he's possessed by Beelzebub, by the prince of demons. He's driving out demons. And here Jesus, in all his rational truth and authority and common sense, how can Satan drive out Satan? If a kingdom is divided against itself, that kingdom cannot stand. If a house is divided against its house, that house cannot stand. If a family is divided against a family, if a relationship, the people who are involved, if they're divided against each other, how are they going to stand? How in business, if those who are working with you, if you're divided against each other, how are you going to stand? If a nation, if you're divided, how are you going to stand? If Satan opposes himself and is divided, he cannot stand. His end has come. And he goes on to say in verse 27, in fact, no one can enter a strong man's house. Truly, I tell you, people can be forgiven all their sins and every slander that they utter. But whoever blasphemes, whoever speaks against the Holy Spirit will never be forgiven. They're guilty of an eternal sin. And he said this because they were calling what he was doing. They were saying they had an impure spirit. They were saying that these are the work of Satan. And I dare say that it's not the work of Satan to be spreading love through and compassion through healing and preaching and teaching the gospel. Okay? And so it says that his mother and brothers arrived. Now, get this. There's his family, and he's talking about families that are divided will not be able to stand. And he says here, standing outside, they sent someone in to call him, and a crowd was sitting around him, and they told him, your mother and your brothers are outside looking for you. And he answered, he responded by, who are my mother and my brothers? And then he looked around at those seated around him, believers, those who were acting on faith, not just talking faith, not talking church, not talking religion, but those who were there believing, people that had been healed, people that were continuing to bring people that needed to be healed, people who healed and delivered from all kinds of stuff. And so he said, here are my brothers, my mother and my brothers. Whoever does God's will is my brother and sister and mother. And I find that so interesting here in Mark verses chapter 3, that he's saying obedience is thicker than blood. Obedience to healing, obedience to choosing faith, obedience to choosing to follow after God, to follow after God's will for your life is thicker than blood. And so what I'm going to share with you today, the two highlights of this particular story is, one, in that what's for you is for you. What God has for you is for you. If healing is for you, begin to believe in healing, no matter what somebody says, no matter the time or the hour, no matter where you are. Okay? So kind of hang on to that. Let that give your faith a little boost, that you don't have to be at a certain place at a certain time in order to receive some. We go chasing after all kinds of stuff. That next book, that next video, that next reel, that next, I got to get on this particular social media account. If I'm going to get, I got to get on their page. I got to get on their feed. I got to get this. No, what you got to get is Christ. Okay? Christ is still in the healing business, even today. And so keep that in mind. Press in with your faith. And also the passage that I want you to get there at the very end is that we surround ourselves with a lot of people. We talked about this yesterday. We surround ourselves with a lot of people. Consider surrounding yourself with people of faith, with people that are there to build you up and not tear you down. People get into a church that's there to love, and to love with compassion, and that treats the gospel like it is the gospel. It is the power to those to believe. And press in for one another. Okay? Again, I hope you're doing well. Enjoy your Friday night. I love you, and I'll see you again tomorrow. Night-night.